Hello and welcome back to Bicycle Legs and another edition of In Defense Of. Today I'm taking a suggestion from a few of my viewers who suggested that I cover this album, and I'm going to be looking at Yes's 1978 album Tormato. And there's the band on the back all looking very cool in their shades. Now this is a album with the classic lineup of John Anderson, Chris Squire, Steve Howe, Rick Wakeman and Alan White. They'd gotten back together on the previous album Going for the One, which many consider to be a Yes classic, me included. Then they came out with this album. And I mean, the first thing that a lot of people don't like about this album is the cover, with the tomatoes smashed all over it. And yeah, it's not a great cover, but, you know, don't judge an album by its cover any more than you judge a book by its cover. I must say that I think that the fans have warmed to this album over the years. Definitely, though, the critics hated this album and still don't sort of regard it very highly. And more importantly, the band really don't speak well of this album. And that's a shame. In my previous In Defense Of series, I've often said that the album is worthwhile, but I'd still probably rank it in the bottom half of band's catalogue. If you've seen my In Defense Of Love Beach, and then you've seen my studio albums ranked of Emerson, Lake and Palmer, you'll see that that one does come about third from the bottom, even though I still think it's a worthwhile album. This album, on the other hand, I think this is a top 10 Yes album. And Yes have got 20 odd albums, so, you know, I'm definitely putting this sort of mid-pack, if not slightly higher. I think this is a really good album. It's definitely a reaction to the punk movement, not so much in the... Like, it obviously doesn't sound like a punk album. It still sounds like Yes. It still sounds very much progressive rock. But they've definitely been influenced in cutting down the length of the tracks, having more songs on the album. There's 9 songs on this album. The last time they had that many tracks on an album was Fragile, way back in 1971. Since then, they'd been doing a lot of extended pieces. I mean, obviously culminating in Tales from Topographic Oceans, which was a double album, 4 songs, every song taking up the entire side of a vinyl record. So they're definitely influenced by that, but there's also definitely a slightly harder edge to some of the playing on here. Not punky, but definitely a harder, more brittle sort of edge to the songs. So let's go through it track by track. It starts off with Future Times, which I think is a really good song. It definitely has that Yes sound. It goes into, like, Future Times and Rejoice, the first 2 tracks are really kind of one track that they've split into 2. I like that song. I think John's vocals on it are great. Then it goes into Don't Kill the Whale, which was a single off the album, and I love that song, a song written by John Anderson and Chris Squire. Chris Squire writing the music for it. Love, love, love that song. I love the ecological lyric to it. I love the music to it. I think it's a fabulous single. It still, again, has that wonderful Yes sound. There's some really good Steve Howe guitar playing on it. Then you get Madrigal, which is absolutely beautiful, listening to Rick Wakeman playing his Thomas Goff harpsichord, and beautiful vocals on it again. Definitely, I mean, that one was written by Anderson and Wakeman, and it definitely has that sort of sound. Rick was a beautiful, beautiful player. And probably still is. I haven't seen him in concert for a long time. So then you get Release, Release, which really does have that kind of energetic not quite punky, but definitely that sort of attitude to it. Musically, it doesn't sound at all like punk music. It sounds like Yes, like most of this album I think does. But it definitely has an energy that earlier Yes music probably didn't have, a drive to it, if you know what I mean. I believe that's the song that Steve Howe said in an interview. The record company said, "Oh, is the whole album like this?" And he said, "Yeah, it's all like that," knowing full well that no Yes album is all like one song. So apparently the record company rather liked Release. Then you get into side two. Side two starts off not quite as good. It has Arriving UFO, which is a nice track, but it's not one of my favourites. And then after that you get the one song on here that still I'm not a big fan of, and that is Circus of Heaven. I've always felt that Circus of Heaven lyrically and musically is a little bit twee. You know, even has sort of John's young son doing a little spoken bit at the end. Yeah, I've never been a big fan of that song. But then the album closes with two fabulous tracks. You get Onward, written by Chris Squire, absolutely gorgeous ballad. A little bit of orchestration on it. It's an absolutely beautiful song. Always have really loved that. And then you get the wonderful, energetic, and probably longest track on the album. I think it's about 7-8 minutes, on the Silent Wings of Freedom. Definitely has that Yes feel to it, but it again has that real sort of driving energy that I think was slightly influenced by the punk movement that had been going on in 77 and 78. So that's the album on the whole. I think this is a really good Yes album. The shorter tracks give you a bit more variety on the album, which I actually quite like. They give more of an opportunity for all the different members to be involved in various ways. I think this album has some of the best John Anderson and Chris Squire close harmony singing, and for me, that's one of the things I love most about Yes. It's one of the reasons I love the album that came a little later, not the next one, but the one after, that kind of really broke them into the sort of 80s pop world, which is 90125. One of the things I love about 90125 is the beautiful close harmony John Anderson, Chris Squire vocals you get on songs like Hold On. You get a lot of that on here. You get it on Future Times and Rejoice. You definitely get it on Don't Kill the Whale, and on Release, and Silent Wings of Freedom, and Onward. Onward's almost a duet between John and Chris. So I think that's one of the reasons I really rate this album. If you're a Yes fan and haven't been a big fan of this album, or you've been put off by the negative reviews and the negative comments from the band about this album, I definitely recommend you go and give this album another try, because I think it's one that's really grown on me. When I first listened to this album, I was influenced by the critics and the band's sort of take on the album, and I didn't rate it as highly. But it's an album that's really grown on me over the years. So I would definitely recommend that you go and have a listen. If you're not a Yes fan, this probably isn't the best place to start, but it's also not necessarily the worst place to start, because it has the Yes sound, but in sort of bite-sized chunks, rather than having to listen to a 15-20 minute piece and try and get all the way through that, which for a new fan can be a little bit daunting. So that's my take on this. Let me know in the comments what you think of this album. I'd really love to know whether you're a fan of this album or whether you don't rate this album so highly. So please let me know. I love reading the comments. Thank you to everybody who's subscribed in the last week. My last video, the King Crimson studio albums rank, kind of took off which is really lovely. And I want to thank all the new subscribers that I have on the channel. Please do like, share and subscribe. It really, really does help the channel out. If you're new to the channel, please go and have a look at some of my other videos. I have other in defense of videos, and there's a playlist for that. Everything I have is playlisted. So my studio albums ranked shows are playlisted, my in defense of are playlisted, my reviews are playlisted, my anniversary albums, my favorite albums of all time, and so on. There's even a playlist of appearances that I've made on other people's channels, if you're interested in that at all. If you want to follow me on social media, I'm at bicyclelegs on Instagram and Twitter. Instagram, I'm mostly posting the albums I happen to be listening to at the time. Twitter, I talk about anything and everything, but I am trying to give that more of a music focus. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.